Division of Energy Assistance and the Office of Community Services, and welcoming you to the webinar that's dealing with the LIHEAP Household Report. This is the second webinar that we've done in the last couple of months. The first one being a very detailed step-by-step run through of the household report, and this one is more highlighting the some of the common issues that we've experienced in working with states on the household reports. These reports are reports that go back many years, but now with OLDC that you're using and some of the validation checks that we have, we are seeing more where there's some systemic problems. And right now I will introduce Josephine Raggio-Adia to talk to you from the point of view of a liaison to the states in working with these reports. Josephine?
Yes. Thank you so much, Leon. First of all, I would like to thank everyone for attending this webinar, and also thank the Apprise team for holding the session. I am one of the regional analysts for Region 2, 4, and 9, and this afternoon we are working with Apprise to give you this webinar on the household report. So as you can see from the screen or from the PowerPoint, the household report action transmittal and instructions were issued a while ago, and you can see here the link. So I believe this is live. So once you get the copy of this PowerPoint, you'll be able to click on that action transmittal and instruction. And what it says is it gives you the instruction on the deadline for the final 2017 household report, which is due in OLDC on December 15, 2017. If you have already submitted your household report, which was actually due on September 1st, and if your report was estimated, we are asking you to submit your final household report by December 15. And after that, Apprise, our contractors, will be helping review all your reports, and they may contact you if there is any issue on the household report that you have submitted. And for any guidance that you need about program operations, especially if you need to change some of your program components that may affect your household report, please contact your regional liaisons, and there is listed here as well is the link to the contact information of all your regional liaisons. So if you have any further question about this household report, I believe we have a Q&A after this. Thank you.
Hi there, this is Melissa Torgerson. We're going to jump right into the remainder of the webinar. Thank you, Joji and Leon. Just some housekeeping points. First of all, the session is being recorded. Second, if you look at the menu bar in the GoToWebinar, you'll see that there is a handout posted. So these slides are already posted. You can download them right from this webinar in that menu bar. If you need help with that, go ahead and type in the chat, and Michelle and Dan are at Apprise and willing to help walk you through that. Michelle and Dan are also going to jump in and correct me if I mischaracterize anything, or to clarify if they see something that needs clarification. So as Leon mentioned, this webinar focuses on the LIHEAP household report long form, and the long form is required for both states and territories. The tribes are required to fill out a short form. As Joji mentioned, final household report data is due in OLDC on December 15th. We'll repeat this deadline a few more times throughout these slides. We did offer a more in-depth household report webinar a week before last, and we actually did, it was about 90 minutes long, and we went line by line through the report to talk about details related to each data field. And so OCS is hoping to post that webinar soon. However, if you'd like a copy before that, you can go ahead and contact the folks at Apprise, and they will send you a copy of those slides. This webinar is much more brief. We expect it to last 30 minutes or less. And what we're going to go over at a very high level are some of the household report rules. We're going to just briefly review a few of the key data validations. We're going to talk about some of the resources that we've put into place this year to help grantees proactively make sure their reports are accurate, both through emails and a check before you submit document. We're going to cover a few very common reporting issues and ways that you can make sure you avoid kind of some common pitfalls, and then we'll go over some grantee resources. There are at least 2 stops along the way for questions and answers, and if you'll notice in the bottom left-hand corner of each slide is a number. So if you have a question on a particular slide, jot down the number so that we can reference it when answering your questions. So it's important to point out that we understand LIHEAP is a very diverse, well, it's a block grant, which means that across states and territories, you are going to see very diverse program design. And this is awesome, but it also sometimes makes it challenging to consistently report what the program is doing to Congress and other stakeholders. The household report is an OCS required report that all grantees must complete. And even though we have a diverse program, OCS has to report that kind of consistent information to Congress. And so the household report kind of allows grantees to enter information in a consistent way, and then we can use that information to talk about LIHEAP. In order to, if you go to the next slide, in order to kind of address the diversity of our programs and the differences in our programs, we rely a lot on the notes section. And if you've been on past webinars, you'll know that we tell people all the time to overuse that notes section if they need to explain things that are out of the ordinary, things that may raise an eyebrow, things that maybe those few fields in the report won't let you necessarily explain. And so what happens when you do that is, first of all, Apprise uses it when they review your document so that they can understand the numbers they're seeing and may not have to call you. But also, we use those footnotes extensively in the report to Congress. And we have an example on the next slide from the 2014 report to Congress, where you'll see that we've summarized by state the different kinds of heating and cooling assistance, and then there are extensive footnotes that explain, in this case, it looks like we're talking about the SNAP Heat and Eat benefits. And so if any of you have recently looked at a report to Congress, and I encourage you to do so, you'll see there are a ton of footnotes. And so we are using those notes that you put in your section so that when your legislator reads this, they can go through those and see specifically what your state is doing and how it might differ from other states in the nation. So we've talked about this the last couple of years, so we're going to talk about it at a very high level. But when Apprise gets your data, they're looking for 3 main things. The first thing they're doing is checking internal consistency of the numbers in your report. So there are certain, for example, there are certain columns that need to sum or rows that need to sum, and they're going to look for that sum. There are certain areas where we need unduplicated counts, and Apprise is checking to make sure that that logically we're seeing unduplicated counts. And so what we did in this last webinar on the November 15th was we went through each field and talked about some of the checks that we run. And so I'd encourage you once again, if you don't have a copy, to contact Apprise for that, or to be watching for it on the OCS training site, so that you can see if you want a refresher about how we look at each field. We also look at current year data compared to your model plan. So, for example, if your model plan says that you're going to have a cooling program, but we get your household report and there are no cooling households in the field, your report will be flagged. Similarly, if you say you have a cooling program in your household report, but when we go back to your model plan, there is no cooling program listed, that will also be flagged. So that's one of the things that we'll check. And then finally, we're going to look at current year data to previous year data. So I'm trying to provide examples. If a household received cooling this year, but they did not get cool, you had no households get cooling last year, we are going to flag the report and send you a note that says, did you mean to fill out this field? We're also going to look at it the opposite way, right? So if you served cooling households last year and this year you have none, we're going to flag it and give you a call. We also look at whether or not you're serving significantly more or less clients. So if a state served 10,000 households with cooling assistance last year, and then this year they're only serving 100 households, or vice versa, we're going to give you a call and make sure that that wasn't a typographical error. And so we're looking at anything that's 10 times more or less. That's kind of the standard that we have in the checks. As we've mentioned in the past, and many of you have likely experienced, many of these validation checks are already programmed into OLDC. So if a check fails, you're going to get either a warning or a fatal error message. If you get a warning, this is kind of a, the best way to describe this is kind of a heads up, 7-Up, you need to take a look at this and make sure that the number you entered is correct, confirm the data. Also, a warning message is a good time to include a note, right? To me, that's, if you see a warning pop up, a prize is going to have that same check that causes them to flag your report. So whenever you see a warning and you've confirmed the information is correct, it's always wise to leave a note. A fatal error message indicates inconsistent data that must be corrected. So this is something that is mathematically impossible. Something doesn't match in a report and there's no way there can be any kind of discrepancy. And so this requires you to fix it before you move on. On the next slide here, we talk about some things to do. If you get a warning message, but you have an explanation and you've confirmed the data is correct, add a note. So that's what I was just saying. If you see a warning, just use it as a great kind of reminder to add a note to your report. If a warning message appears and you don't know how to resolve it, either you're having issues with your own data or you're not sure why that warning is popping up, we encourage you to contact a prize for assistance and we'll help walk you through that. And similarly with a fatal error, in most cases a person will get a fatal error and they'll realize that they typed in the wrong thing or they were off a field. But if you get a fatal error and you still think your data is right, that's a great time to call a prize and we'll help you work through that step by step and figure out what's going on. So we're going to just pause briefly for questions regarding data validation and checks and the notes section. Are there any questions?
It doesn't look like there are any questions right now, Melissa. And just for a reminder for everyone who's on the webinar right now, to ask a question, you can either raise your hand and I will unmute you, and then you can ask your question to the group, or feel free to type in a question at any time, and then during our question breaks, I'll read them out to the group to have your question answered. But right now, it doesn't look like we have any questions, Melissa, so I think we can move on.
Great, thanks, Michelle. So we're going to talk about some of the steps that we've taken to help grantees kind of proactively. In November, or throughout this last month, we've been sending grantees emails to remind them of issues identified during their 2016 household report review. These were customized, so each grantee received an email that specifically drew attention to the topics where you were called or where you were asked to fix something. And it could have been small or it could have been big or one thing or many things. But the idea here was to say, here is an issue we think you should pay attention to. I think it's important here to point out that what we're seeing in a lot of states, especially with staff turnover, is that a coordinator and perhaps their IT person or their analyst will go in and fix the current year report, but they may not always circle back around and fix the report in their IT system. And so that's just a really important reminder that we see people coming back each year with the same errors, and oftentimes it's a result of kind of doing a temporary fix to get the report submitted, but not going back and fixing that more systemic kind of root of the issue. So we just really encourage you to work with your IT staff to make sure those issues are resolved within your reporting system. Grantees are encouraged to review their 2017 data to ensure that the issues are addressed, and this kind of goes back to what I was just saying, but we have found that in cases where people are making the same mistakes over, it's really helpful to go through and kind of preemptively take a look and see if that error is coming up again before you submit your report. We also came up with a check before you submit document. I think this is, I wish I had had this as a grantee, both for myself and to hand to my IT staff to be able to say, okay, we have our report done, we think it's correct, but here's a document that outlines all of the checks that a prize uses during a review of household reports. And we designed this so grantees could kind of go through and proactively identify and correct any reporting issues before submission. And so we really strongly encourage you all to access it and use it. It will definitely follow up, reduce the follow-up calls and emails that you receive from a prize, and then need to substantially revise your reports. And this is especially important with the household report because right on its tail are the grantee survey and performance data form, the performance data form, which is due in January, which contains both the grantee survey and the performance measure data, and that's a lot of work as well. And so we hear that a lot from grantees. Oh my gosh, I just feel inundated when I have to go back and fix my household report at the same time I'm trying to get these other reports ready. So we really encourage you to use this tool to proactively identify and fix any errors prior to submission. The way that the tool works, if you want to go to the next slide, is that it's literally like a checklist, and we encourage you to go through all the checks and answer yes or no. And if you can answer yes to all the questions, a prize feels that you're ready to certify and submit the LIHEAP household report. It's important to point out that some of the complicated checks, for example, unduplicated counts, have longer explanations. And so it's important to really look through those explanations and break them out to make sure you're reading through the whole thing. Once again, I think this is an excellent tool to hand to your IT staff who may be putting together your reports or pulling your reports or building them. This would be a great tool to make sure that they're building their queries correctly. We went ahead and emailed this out to folks. However, if you did not receive it, you can also find it at the Performance Management website, and the link is here. So we're going to talk about common reporting issues. And when I say common, I know a lot of you are like, you know what, we do this every year. We've done it for 20 years. You know, we might have to fix one or two things, but we were always pretty good. We're trying to have the fix one or two things go away, right? We want to see more states turn in a report that requires no follow-up or revisions. And so these are the top 3 areas that we see even the most experienced grantees kind of fumbling on. So we're going to go through those really briefly. The first is bill payment assistance reporting. 24 grantees last year faced problems reporting households served with bill payment assistance. This is reported in Section 1, Line 6 of the household report form. And to be fair, we understood that we would have a higher number of folks that needed additional work in this area because 2016 was the first year the data field was required. Bill payment assistance includes households receiving heating, cooling, or crisis assistance benefits which pay a share of energy bills or utility deposits. So in other words, we're wanting to capture those people that had bill payment assistance, but this particular row, we're not interested in things like weatherization or equipment repair replacement or other crisis services that weren't a bill payment. So this is a new field as of 2016, and what we would really encourage you to do is, number 1, read the instructions, but number 2, to reach out to us if you need help figuring out what this means. We've helped a lot of IT developers, for example, our database administrators, our report analysts, kind of be able to pull out which households these are. So this is a new field in a report. Many of you have had to modify your reports to include it. 17 grantees had inconsistencies between their LIHEAP household report and model plan. So this is across a few different areas. So first, if a grantee indicated it planned to provide a particular type of assistance in their model plan, we would expect to see households reported under that type of assistance. So this goes back to the example I gave where a state says we have a cooling plan, or we have a cooling element in their model plan, but when we get to their household report, there are no cooling households put in the field. And so we would have to call and make sure that was correct. And so this is one area where we're seeing issues. We also expect households to fall within the income thresholds specified in their model plans for each type of assistance. And so in your model plan, you'll know that you say for a family of 4, the income, the maximum income is X. We would expect to see that in your household report, the households that you're assisting match that. And so that's another area that we will be looking at. I want to point out a few different things. Many of you who are at the national training remember that there was a session on kind of using contingency language in your state plan. So for example, some of you in your state plans will say, state X will institute a cooling program if the following condition is met. For example, we have money after X date, or there's a particular need or condition that's met in terms of weather, or so on. And so this is a great, this would be a great place to use the notes section to say, we indicated that we would have a cooling program conditional based on this. That condition was not met, which is why we're not reporting any households. So those kinds of anomalies are the things you would use the notes section for. Similarly, we do have some folks that use different income levels throughout the year or for different program components. And so in our step-by-step outline, we went over which income threshold to use in your household report. But if there are discrepancies, we'd once again encourage you to use the notes section. And finally, this is a simple one, but it trips a lot of folks up. 12 grantees failed to confirm they reported final data. So as many of you know, you're required to turn in a preliminary household report on September 1 with your model plan. And many states indicate that this is estimated data. For many states, the program year isn't done yet. So they're clicking the estimated data boxes and saying that yes, the data below includes estimated figures, and then they go into update their report for the final due on December 15th and forget to uncheck those boxes. And so what we've done here is gone ahead and pointed out very specifically where you need to select no in the instructions section, as well as uncheck any estimated data check boxes in sections 1 and 4. I just want to point out that there are many states who, when they go to do their estimated figures, they're basing their figures on the prior year numbers or looking at their current year numbers and kind of ballparking it and eyeballing it. We really expect that for the final counts, you're obviously using your program records and your data tracking systems to give us accurate figures. Are there questions about the checking before you submit document and common reporting issues?
It doesn't look like we have any questions right now, Melissa.
Okay, great. So if we move on, once again, I said we'd mention this a few different times. The final household report is due in OLDC on December 15th, 2017. And the reminder we always give folks every year is that there are multiple steps, as many of you have experienced, but some of you new folks may not have. There are many steps to submitting your report in OLDC. It needs to be entered and saved and certified and submitted, and those steps take time. And so, and that's assuming you don't have to fix validation errors or address those errors that may pop up if you are putting in data where there are discrepancies or maybe making some errors. And so it's very important that you get on early, make sure your login works, and that you're giving yourself enough time to go through this process. I've done a few state visits, and I've seen this very slide on some cubicle and office walls. It's very helpful to understanding the steps that it takes to not just submit, but also when you want to revise your household report, and many of you will end up revising it between now and the 15th, or even after, if a prize does need to follow up with you, these are the steps you need to take, and this kind of walks you through the both forward and backwards motion of those steps. So finally, we've included a lot of resources, and there are a lot of resources. I know that we have both new and experienced folks on the phone. We may have experienced coordinators, but new IT people, and so it's important to distribute these to the people in your offices who will be putting together this report. We have the action transmittal and instructions. That's what Joji mentioned at the beginning of the call. That went out week before last, and the instructions, we hear this from a lot of people every year, is I haven't looked at the instructions for years. I'd really encourage you to look at them. There was a lot of hard work that OCS put into these, and they've learned a lot over the years from grantees and included a lot of detailed information. So I encourage you to take another look if you haven't looked recently. The check before you submit tool, this is what we were just talking about. It's a great checklist. We not only encourage you to use it, but also encourage you to give us feedback, prize feedback on areas where it could be more clear or more helpful. I believe, and Dan can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we'll also have these for the other required reports as well. And then, is that correct, Dan?
That's correct.
Okay, great. And then past year's household report data, I have to say that when I came in as a new coordinator, as many of us do, we don't always get the greatest handoff, right? There's not always a nice little baton pass where you can have the overlap of the training that you need. And I relied a lot on looking at past reports to make sure that the data I was submitting was jiving with what we had reported in the past. And so if you want to look at your past year's data, I just want to remind everyone that we have a beautiful data warehouse and performance management website out there, and the link is here. You can go back and look back 10 years at your household report data as well as other program data to see whether or not the numbers you're reporting are make sense compared to previous years. So I mentioned that it's important to get onto OLDC and make sure your login is still valid and that you're not having any issues with the system. I am guilty of waiting until 9 p.m. the day it's due to go in and quickly type in my numbers only to find out that my login expired. And so it's really important to get on there early, check it out, take a look, make sure your system can access it. And if you do need help, we've listed all of the different resources here for you to contact. And I understand that the help desk is open pretty late, all the way through all time zones. So I think till 6 p.m. So folks should be able to access them for most of the day. And finally, more support. We've helped a lot of people through their household report. The liaisons, as Joji mentioned, are especially helpful when it comes to understanding what would be classified in a particular, what's heating, what's cooling, what's crisis. We, especially from new coordinators, get that question a lot. Where should I be counting certain things? Is this even allowable? And so the program or the OCS liaisons are great. And if they have further questions or believe we'd be able to help, they'll also refer to us. You can call us directly, though. Daniel, Jorge, and Michelle are on the East Coast, and I'm on the West Coast. And so you're welcome to call anytime and ask any question, and we will walk you through it. And honestly, chances are that another state has dealt with the same thing you're dealing with, and we've either created a tool or resources to help them. So I would just encourage you, don't spend a lot of time kind of banging your head against your desk. If you have an issue, pick up the phone and call. We may be able to help you resolve it very quickly and with less pain than you anticipated. And I think that that's all that we have to present. I'd encourage any questions at this time that you may have.
We just have a note from Patrice, another one of the regional liaisons, and she just wanted to let you all know that if a grantee needs a password reset, please feel free to contact your regional liaison to assist you with that as well. So that's another resource for everyone to use.
Great. So you may get off the line and think about other questions, or maybe you were hoping that we would go into more detail and you missed the webinar on the 15th. I'd encourage you to contact us and we'll help walk through anything you need and make sure that you get the tools and resources you need to complete your report. Thank you for joining us. Anything more, Dan or Leon or Joji?
Nothing else. Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you.